Wow, you weren't wrong about the music, Clive. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Clive. Thank you for that kind introduction, but also for inviting me to address this prodigious group in such splendid surroundings. It reminds me a little bit of the Lords, although I'm hoping that you'll be a slightly kinder audience. I have to say I'm still terrified when they start rumbling, order, order, when I often make mistakes, as I do quite frequently. You may be aware that in the Lords there is no speaker, so you're never really sure whose turn it is to speak. And the way this is settled is through a rather opaque system of people bobbing up and down like meerkats until you're the last one standing. And it's quite crazy. And had it not been, I probably never would have asked a supplemental question if it hadn't been for sitting to my left. I had Neil Kinnock, who at the appropriate moment said, "Oh, go for it, girl, it's your turn." So I'm very grateful to him, otherwise I've never got off the blocks. So you might be, and actually you might be thinking, well, why is she not so familiar? Well, I've only really been in the Lords for a year. And my so-called elevation was announced in November 2010. And that was actually 5 days before I gave birth to my first son. And it has been pointed out that that's in effect 2 life sentences in 1 week. So you might be wondering, well, what brought about this unusual turn of events? Well, I didn't just get lucky. It was quite a lot of hard work. 24 hours of labour, an epidural and 2 midwives, if I'm honest. But actually, you're probably maybe more interested in how I arrived in the House of Lords. And well, that was easy. I'm a self-made billionairess, and I just gave a very quiet donation to the Labour Party, and the rest followed, really. I was quite surprised. No, that's also not true. The real reason is actually I don't know. I have spent most of my career working in environmental legislation. If anyone's been arrested for recklessly harassing a dolphin, that's one of mine. But I've also worked on the renewable transport fuel obligation, the renewable heat incentive, and also, as Clive mentioned, the Climate Change Act. I guess I've been something of a professional troublemaker, and I do like a good argument. So I think those are the qualities that Ed Miliband was thinking about when he appointed me a Labour peer. So what have I been doing in my first year in the Lords? Well, if you read the Daily Mail, I've mostly been breastfeeding on the terrace. But I hope that's not the sum total of my contribution. There has been actually quite a lot of whipping going on, but I don't let the Daily Mail find out about that. So one of the most rewarding things I've done, I think, is to join the Green Globe Network, which is a network of legislators around the world, from parliaments around the world. And that has afforded me some amazing experiences. In fact, just today, I met with a delegation of Mexican lawmakers who are currently looking to pass legislation in their country on climate change. We've hosted 2 delegations of Chinese officials who've also been over to try to learn from us about our Climate Change Act and also how to run, or maybe perhaps how not to run, emissions trading as they move towards introducing their own system of carbon markets. I was lucky enough last year to visit South Korea with Tim Yo. That's one hell of a developing country, I have to say. The technology there, I think, puts many of Western countries to shame, and they're moving ahead as well. And I'm pleased to say, despite the fact that Tim Yo and I, well, neither of us could wield a chopstick in anything other than an embarrassing fashion for everyone, that didn't put them off, and they were, I think, suitably impressed. And I hope we helped win a very crucial vote in their committee, and their legislation looks like it's going to hit the statute books and start to create a carbon market in 2015. Now, you might be all thinking, well, this sounds very jolly, but what's it got to do with me? Well, I like to quote Alan Kay, the computer scientist, who said that the best way to predict the future is to invent the future. And I think that's why I'm delighted to be here tonight, because all of you in this room are involved with that task of inventing the future. And I hope that the future that you invent, when all of the valves and the sprockets and the diffusers and all the things that you're working on are implemented, the world will be cleaner, the environment will be cleaner, and climate change hopefully will be less of a threat. And for that, future generations are going to be grateful. My son included. He loves a good sprocket. He doesn't exactly know what they're for. Probably, hopefully one day he will work it out, and then he can tell me. But again, you might be thinking, well, still, what does all this swanning around in Korea, misusing a chopstick, have to do with me? Well, the answer really is politics and competitiveness, because every government likes to want to be seen to be acting on environmental issues, but they're often terrified that if they go too far, if they're moving too fast and other countries are not following, then it's going to have an economic disadvantage to our country, but also it will be environmentally irrelevant if everyone doesn't act together. So, this leads to quite confusing effects in our politicians. I mean, take our beloved Chancellor, for example. I mean, he says to his party faithful, we're not going to go further or faster than Europe, and then blow me if he doesn't introduce a policy that does exactly that with the carbon floor price. So what's going on? And what's going on is that this is a genuine fear that we need to transition to a cleaner economy, but we don't really want to do it on our own. And that's why the work of the Green Globe Network, I think, is really, really important. And they have published a report that shows that the number of countries that are adopting legislation on climate change is growing. There's 16 countries so far, and new ones keep getting added. Even in Australia recently, we saw the introduction of carbon pricing. Obviously, if we lose a member of the lower house in Australia, the vote was very, very close, we could be in trouble. But I don't think even opposition leader Tony Abbott, with his rather spooky pledge in blood to get rid of this policy, would stoop that low. So I think we're safe. So what I want to say really is that the momentum towards legislating on climate change is growing, and on environmental issues more broadly. And every time a country does join us in this, it should make your job easier. It should mean that there's a growing demand for the products and services that you're developing, and that if you are reliant on subsidies or policies or fiscal advantages that the government bring in, that you can feel safe that the rug won't be pulled from underneath your feet. Unless, of course, from the solar industry, in which case you can expect all manner of soft furnishings to be pulled from underneath you. Are there any people from the solar industry in tonight? Only a few. See, I think they're mostly in the Caribbean, because they're all obviously money-grabbing rogues, according to the government. Anyway, I don't believe that. The way that subsidies are introduced is obviously highly contentious. Everyone expects subsidies to change, but there is a way of doing it, and I think it's fair to say that this government's handling of the solar feed-in tariffs has been a pretty lamentable affair. So anyway, to return to my theme of other countries, you might be thinking, well, okay, this is all very nice, but what about the US? What about the USA? They are still the world's biggest economy, just about, and what are they doing? Well, even there, I think there's cause for hope. Just last week, you may be following the Republican race for nomination. Newt Gingrich, surprisingly, seemed to be emerging as a potential winner. Now, how could that possibly be good news? This is a man who, after all, was impeached for a breach of code of ethics whilst he was a senator, which, given the state of American politics, is good going. How could this be good news? Well, Newt has a grand idea. You can write it off as a crazy plan of a man who has an old baby's face, but he actually came forward with wanting to colonize the moon with a moon base. Now, the reason I think that's good news is because the moon, like the Earth, is full of thorium. And this might just be the way we get some funding for a thorium-powered nuclear power station. Now, some of you who have been following my career in the Lords, that's probably actually just David and Jay, my assistants, but if you have been following what I've been up to, you'll know that thorium is something of an obsession of mine at the moment. And I'm sure David's thinking, yeah, Bri, was that such a good idea linking it to Newton, his moon base? But I'm sorry, it was a segue. This is something I'm passionate about. And Clive, I'd just like to say that I hope in future years, maybe we'll have an award category for the best advance in thorium-based nuclear power. And if you do, please do invite me back, because I'd love to see that happen. Okay, so back to the US. What's happening? Well, we saw in President Obama's speech for the State of the Union that he's now backing the investment in clean energy technologies to power 3 million homes on public land. And he also entertained an audience with a song. But I'm not going to do that. I think that would be too embarrassing for everyone. We also have seen repeatedly reports coming out of the Pentagon pointing out how serious climate change is. They even, I think, in 2004 tried to persuade George Bush, but they're not miracle workers. They're just the Pentagon. So, and I think they used rather too many long words, if I'm honest. So that didn't seem to work. They should really have drafted in Lord Prescott to help out, because there's a man, he doesn't use long words. In fact, doesn't really use sentences at all. But he is actually, though, my favourite speaker in the Lords. Hugely entertaining. So if you ever get to watch on Parliament TV, look out for when Lord Prescott enters the chamber. So the Pentagon takes it seriously. The military in the US have set themselves targets to become, their bases will become carbon neutral, and they will be using, they hope, 25% renewable energy by 2025. So even the US, I would argue, is on the same track. They're just not going to be very happy to admit it, and they certainly wouldn't like to think it was for any other reason than for their own self-interest. Now, I would like to end just on a few words about some climate skeptics. They are a rare breed, but a few of them have made their home in the rather plush surroundings of the House of Lords. I mean, to be fair, we have a moth and a rat problem as well, so, you know, it takes all sorts. But I really shouldn't compare Lord Lawson to a rat. I think if we could perhaps just forget that happened. There was a very cheering, I thought, and a news story from last year, and that was the Koch brothers' spectacular own goal. The Koch brothers are brothers who are billionaires, oilmen, who have been funding climate skepticism in the States for many years. And bless them, they were so keen to find out whether climate change was real that they commissioned a well-known physicist. He also happened to be a climate skeptic, but, you know, they were trying, and asked him to write a report on whether climate change was real. And Richard Muller, for that was his name, went away for 2 years and came back and actually reported that the mainstream scientists were, in fact, correct. Climate change was happening and that we needed to do something about it. So thank you, Koch brothers, for that. $600,000 well spent, I'd say. And so there we are. Now, I think I've been a bit serious, haven't I? So I should probably end on a joke. I heard recently that a parish priest is set to give eco-sinners an opportunity to confess in what's thought to be the world's first green confessional booth. Of course, you won't be able to just turn up and confess all your sins at once. You'll have to separate them out into bottles, glass, plastic, and paper. See, sorry about that. It's obviously a recycled joke. You've probably heard it before. Yes, groan away. Right, I'm nearly done. I don't want to end on a joke, actually, because actually why we're here tonight is very serious. And all the work that you're all doing is hugely important. And I mean, I often think that tackling climate change is a little bit like society's in a vehicle, we're hurtling towards a brick wall. We don't know how far the brick wall is away. We don't even know how fast we're traveling. But at least there are people out there, you, inventing the brakes. And please do carry on doing what you're doing. It's hugely important. And I wasn't joking. Future generations will be enormously grateful to you. But also, please do keep the pressure up on the people across the road, the politicians. Because if after you've invented the brakes, we need government to help apply them with sufficient force that we avoid that brick wall. So please keep doing what you're doing. Now that that's over, I'm sure you can go on to enjoy the rest of the evening. I know I will. To be honest, I don't get out that much, so thank you very much, Clive. Thank you. Bye-bye.